My name is Jonathan Jordan. I work at the Georgia Baptist Mission Board in groups and faith development. I want to talk to you today for a few minutes regarding small groups. Small groups, what do they look like? Well, the truth is they look like very different from each other. Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes they're different, and they come in all shapes and forms. Small groups, depending on what they're trying to do, look different from church to church, state to state, and across the country. Many times we find small groups, new forms and ways that people are doing them. People are becoming very creative with small groups. But it is important for us to kind of understand just a few basics. No matter what your groups look like, whether you're doing an ongoing series, whether you're doing a semester based, whether you're doing, I don't know what, but it's important there's some essentials. Most groups end up about 8 to 14 people. 25 people is not a small group. That's a large group. And in some cases, I've known groups to even go beyond that. That's not a small group. But on the other hand, it's hard having a small group with 4 people, especially if you're in a couples environment. You've got 2 couples. If one couple misses, then you have a small group with you and your spouse. And that can be a micro group. It's not even a small group; it's a micro group. So usually they come out to about 8 to 14 people. I would say somewhere it just happens this way. It's probably going to be around 12. Even groups that start out, I've had groups that start out with 18 to 20 people in them, and they come back down to 12. For some reason, it's pretty natural. It's comfortable. If someone's out, you still have 8 people there, and you're still able to carry on discussion. And when questions come up, you don't have the same person or 2 people answering those questions every time. Typically, there are some exceptions. Now, I always have to be careful making kind of generalities about what groups look like, but typically, the groups have people in those groups with a similar life stage. May not be similar age. People have children at different times in their life. But they're going to be a similar age, a similar life station, or interest. Sometimes groups surround some type of outdoor activity. Sometimes they would surround parents of preschoolers. Sometimes they're going to surround groups of people that if you've recently lost a loved one in the past 12 months. Those similar interests tend to help us gravitate towards one another. I've been in groups with people 10 years my senior, but they are, we're in the same life station. We all may have, my recent group was parents of teens in high school. My most recent is parents of teens that are transitioning to college. That's kind of where I am. I've got a high school and a college student, and that group was couples that had in the next 12 months had teens transitioning into a college setting. And believe it or not, we had lots to talk about and many fears to discuss. But that was our common bond, and that's what we looked at, and that's what kind of kept us together. Hopefully this group that you have is a mix of people who believe in Christ, believers, Christ followers, and some that aren't. Now, that's not always the case. But hopefully you can structure your group or include or invite. It's a great way to invite people. I've had many people ask me, hey, what all those cars at your house on Monday nights or Wednesday nights or Thursday nights? Well, you know what? We're having a group up there of parents of high school students. You're welcome to come. Well, I know I need to. Now, sometimes they came and sometimes they didn't. But it gives us kind of an entree to invite those folks, give them the subject matter, and many times they will come along. But hopefully when we want to introduce them to a group that has believers and some non-believers, because remember, that's kind of what we're doing it for. The other thing we want to make sure that happens, and it's not too hard to happen, to make sure that typically groups, they're highly relational. Now, there are some critics and people that throw rocks out there and say, well, they just spend time talking about nothing. Well, I understand that criticism. I really do. And I don't discount it. And you have to, if you're a group leader, you have to watch that and kind of monitor that to make sure that you're getting into some sort of biblical text, an application in your group, but they are relational, and that is part of the point. Typically, a small group environment is going to be 50% relational. And many times, a Sunday school environment is only going to be about 25% relational. So you can have a 50% relational, about 25% missional, and about 25% biblical. Not to say that the other 75% is not biblical, but as far as actually hunkering down, reading that text, drawing it out, word for word in that application, that can change for you. Although in a small group environment, it may be only about 25% that, and at least 50% relational, and that's important. That's important to the people that are there. I mentioned before in a previous video, social. You're typically going to have food there. You're typically going to have some kind of icebreaker. This is, what was the worst job you had as a teenager? What was what's the worst car you ever had to drive? What's the best boss you ever had? How'd you meet your spouse? All kinds of icebreakers. You can Google any icebreaker, and there's a ton of them. I would say be careful with icebreakers. Try to play it out in your head. We don't want an icebreaker to be embarrassing, call anyone out, or kind of cut anyone off. Some of them, they may seem silly, but make sure you read through your icebreakers. That's for free. That really wasn't part of this, but they are relational, they are social, and they're personal. These groups, I'll tell you, there are other organizations in the country that talk about doing life together. It's kind of their slogan. And I agree. What a great slogan, because that's exactly what it is. These groups get very close. The people that you're in there with, especially if you're in there for an extended amount of time and you have time to talk about personal matters, you're going to get close. You're going to be talking about, depending on the age of the group, if you're a young 20s group, your conversation is going to go down the line of preschoolers and all those. Well, I don't have preschoolers anymore. So most of our conversation is, how do we take care of our parents? How do we deal with teens that are not necessarily with us all the time? How do we deal with kids that are not in our homes anymore? They're away. And how do we still be godly parents in an environment that's not maybe as structured as it used to be? Those would be the things. If you're younger, in your 20s and 30s, and still have kids at home, how do I still be a Christian? And how do I still be a Christian and have my kids, in sports? People struggle with that. How do I not cut off my child from the world, but still make sure that they're equipped as a young believer to do what they need to do? And you're sharing these stories, and you're sharing your shortcomings in life, and you're sharing, I remember a time where I really blew it with my child. Well, I share, a time where, we had a hard time in our relationship, and we've had all kinds of things shared in our group that I won't share here, obviously, but you can just imagine not everyone grew up the same way I did. People come from all different walks all across the country, and to see them come up and come to a small group, and you end up on a certain night at a certain time at a certain place and trying to talk about how the gospel invaded your life and how Christ invaded your life and changed you forever. Those are personal things. And so we want to underscore those and not underestimate the power of those conversations. And this is essential. This is essential to the group and how it gels and how it bonds and forms around the principles and the questions in the Bible in those groups. We want to make sure every time the group has a biblical base. Otherwise, it just is some sort of social meeting, but it has a biblical base. There's some way that you can tell. We have people doing storying. We have some people that do a similar, more structured lesson. I would have some sort of plan. The successful small groups have some sort of plan. The idea of going in there and, hey, let's just do the. Very, very few people can go in there and just discuss, this is what the leader thought of 30 minutes before the group started. Most small groups, I'll tell you, percentage-wise, most small groups typically follow the pastor in his sermon series. Many pastors now are preaching in sermon series. The pastor will get those questions out to those leaders, or an associate pastor or small group, a director, point person, but most are following those those pastor sermons and they're diving in more, but at least there's a sequence. They may be doing something from a local publisher. There's some Sunday school materials that you can do in Sunday school as well as small groups, and you need to investigate those. You need to have some kind of plan, though, to make sure that your biblical content is down the line, because you've got people coming there with questions. They're wanting to know what's going on. What does the Bible mean? What's it say about this? And we want to make sure that we give solid biblical, able to be proven in the text, not what we think, but able to be proven, point to the verse, and apply that to their lives. There are some other helps out there. You can do different studies. You can do pastor sermon. There's I mentioned storying before. It's read the story in the Bible. It's tell the story. It's rebuild the story, and you can ask questions. And those are great. Through that, you're going to build relationships with one another. And then you've got this missional aspect. I mentioned it in another video. The group I have is every semester we have some sort of mission project. We adopt a family at Christmas. We work, we take up groceries. We work with Crisis Pregnancy Center. We do, whatever it is. I mentioned before we work at the concession stand, so parents of those players can watch the game. There's always a mission project, and if you can't find a mission project in your community, I'll be honest with you here, and you may email me. I'm sure my email is on here somewhere. If you can't find one, I would venture to say you're not looking too hard, honestly. If anything that we have been accused of is kind of sitting back and not doing a whole lot, getting involved in our community. And we've got to break out of kind of those holy huddles and venture in the community to let them know that we care, to let them know that we love them. Now, they may not think the way exactly we do, or they may not believe in everything exactly the way we do, but we can help people. We can help people in a way that we see in a Mark II environment where there's someone there that needs help and they bring them to Jesus. Now, we don't know whether that was a first encounter or one of many encounters. In the same way in your community. You don't know if it's going to take one time to meet someone in your community, or it may take many times of being involved in your community. But if us as the church, not the building, but the people, we are the church, we have got to be on mission in our communities to make a difference, to help people, to love people in our community. And we have to ask ourselves a few questions. If your church went away, or your small group disappeared, would your community ever know it? In some communities, the answer would be a resounding yes. We would miss that church, that local body of believers, because they are so impactful on our community. Other communities would say we don't even notice them at all. And in a local school in our community, I was asking about the school, and someone told me right away, the church right down the street has basically adopted them. Anything they need, that church meets the need for kids, the needs that kids may have in that school. They can't do the whole county. They're not that big of a church, but they can do one school. And they've made that their mission, their focus, and their point of outreach. So I would encourage you, make your group missional. So we want it to be biblical. We want it to be missional. We want it to be relational. Understand it's going to be social, and that's great. It's going to be personal. And we want to make sure that these groups help grow people in Christ, as well as show the community who we are as the church. Not as the building, but who we are as a people. That we care and that we love people, and that people matter to God. Therefore, they matter to us. Give it some thought. I look forward to hearing your thoughts below. And thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.